Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we got a couple of things to discuss as we continue with our season preview series. Today we wrap up the Metro Division and discuss how the Carolina Hurricanes and Columbus Blue Jackets played in the 22-23 season, how they did in the 2023 off-season, and how they're shaping up going into the 2023-2024 season. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End Hockey Channel. Now, as usual, I'm going to do another season preview series video, today finishing up the Metropolitan Division. We're going to be discussing how the Carolina Hurricanes and Columbus Blue Jackets did in the 2022-2023 season. We're going to be discussing their additions and losses in the 2023 season. We're going to be discussing their top 3 picks in the 2023 draft, my current projected lineup and point total for 23-24 season, and my off-season grade for both of those two teams. So we're going to start with the Carolina Hurricanes. They had a pretty good season last year. They finished with a record of 52-21-9 for 113 points. First in the Metro, second in the Eastern Conference, only next to the Boston Bruins, who had a fantastic run to the President's Trophy. The Canes did go really deep last year in the playoffs. They were able to get 2-0 and 3-1 leads in the first round series against the Islanders. The Isles forced Game 6, where the Carolina Hurricanes won in overtime. So the Canes beat the Islanders in 6 games in the first round series to oust the wildcard team. They would take on the New Jersey Devils in round 2. They would take a 2-0 series lead. The Devils would make it 2-1, and then they would win games 4 and 5 to take the series in 5 games and oust the Devils in round 2. And then in round 3, they would face the Florida Panthers. And even though there were 4 really close, really tight contested 1-goal games, the Panthers would win all 4 games and sweep the Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Final to advance to the Stanley Cup Final. So Canes did really good to get to the Eastern Conference Final. They had a really good season last year, but it was not enough to get them to the Stanley Cup Final. So they wanted to improve this team to give them that last oomph to hopefully get themselves to the Stanley Cup Final this upcoming season. And I think they did quite well this offseason. So if you look at their losses and additions here, they've had some pretty good losses and additions. More losses than additions, but the additions outweigh the losses a lot more. If you look at their losses, they lose Max Pacioretty to Washington. They lose Andre Kasha, who signed overseas. They lose Paul Stastny, who's still UFA, as well as Derek Stepan, who's still UFA, as well as Jesse Puljujarvi, who's still UFA. They lose Mackenzie McEachran to St. Louis. They traded prospect Massimo Rizzo to Philadelphia. They lose Shane Gostisbehere, who signs with the Detroit Red Wings. They lose Calvin DeHaan, who signs with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And they lose Will Lagesson, who signs with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their additions are pretty significant. They add Michael Bunting, who comes over from the Toronto Maple Leafs, a good top 9 forward. They add Brendan Lemieux, who's a very physical 4th line forward. They add Dmitry Orlov on the defensive end, who's a solid top 4 defenseman. They add Tony DeAngelo on the defensive end, who's a solid 3rd pair offensive defenseman. And then they add Caleb Jones, who can on most teams be a solid 3rd pair defenseman. On the Hurricanes will probably be a spare defenseman. So going to be interesting to see how that all works out, but all in all, I think they did really good this offseason. Bunting replaces the loss of Pacioretty, which was a bad loss to start the season. Last year, Pacioretty didn't even play very much last year, so to get Bunting to replace Pacioretty, I think is a really good addition. Lemieux should definitely replace some of the bomb 6 losses they had in Stepan and Stastny, so I do like those additions there on the forward group. Maybe gets a little bit less deeper than it was last year, but I still think the Canes have a pretty decent forward group. Defensively, they've improved dramatically. They lose Gostisbehere, who was a really good in-season acquisition, really fitting well with the Carolina Hurricanes. But you got Orlov, who's going to fit in the top 4. DeAngelo is most likely going to be a 3rd pair defenseman. Jones was going to improve that defense even more. I think they improved their defense a ton. DeAngelo, Orlov, Jones, they make that defense even more improvement. I mean, look at the defense core. You have Slavin and Burns on the top pair. You can have Orlov and Pesce on the 2nd pair. You can have Shane DeAngelo on the 3rd pair. And then you have Caleb Jones, Dylan Coughlin, and Jillian Chatfield as being your spare defenseman. That is a ton of depth on that defense. I think it's quite easy to say the Carolina Hurricanes may have the best and deepest defense in the NHL. So I think they did really, really well improving their defense. They brought back their goaltending tandem. Both Anderson and Ranta are back after both were pending UFAs. So bringing both of them back, I think, was the right move. It gives Kochetkov one more year, most likely, in the AHL. But all in all, I think Carolina has done really good to bring back Anderson and Ranta. And in my eyes, I think Carolina did extremely well this offseason. Maybe their offense could have used a little bit more improvements, but their defense looks extraordinarily better this year. And they're going to be a scary team to play, as a lot of those defensemen they have right now can put up points with the best of them. So I really do like what the Canes have done this offseason. If you look at their top 3 picks in the 2023 draft, they had the 30th overall pick in the first round, selected left winger Bradley Nadeau. They had the 30th overall pick in the second round. They took right winger Felix Unger-Thorum, and they had the 30th overall pick in the third round, selecting right winger Jaden Perron. So some pretty good picks, in my opinion, there for the Carolina Hurricanes. Not going to lie, I think they had a pretty good draft. They had some pretty decent draft capital, and I think they hit home on most of their NHL draft picks. So some pretty good drafting there for the Carolina Hurricanes, and I think they did really, really good in their draft. If you look at my current 2023-2024 projected lineup for the Carolina Hurricanes, I currently have Andrei Svechnikov playing on the top line with Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis. I have Michael Bunting playing on the second line with Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Marty Necas. I have the third line being Teravainen with Stahl and Fast, and the fourth line being Martinuk with Drury and Nosen. On the defensive end, I have Slavin and Burns, Orlov and Pesci, and Shea and D'Angelo. I have Anderson being the 1A goalie. I have Ranta being the 1B goalie. I have Lemieux, Coughlin, and Chatfield all being spares, and that would be a cap-compliant roster. So, going to be interesting to see, but I think this Carolina Hurricanes team is really deep, is really good. Even if a guy on the defensive end gets injured, they have a ton of defensive depth. So, goaltending-wise, Kocheka could come in if there's an injury. They have a couple of decent depth forwards. So, in my eyes, this Carolina Hurricanes team looks scary, and it will be scary to play against. If you look at my current projected 2023-2024 point total for this team, I have them finishing with around the same point total as they did last year. I have them finishing with a record of 51, 23, and 8 for 110 points. That's second in the Metropolitan Division and third in the Eastern Conference, only 3 less points than they had last year. So right around what they had last year, I have them having another solid season. Even though they don't have that next level offensive talent, I think their offense is still pretty good. Their defense is next level. Their goaltending is still solid. In my eyes, this team will be hard to bump from the top spot in the Metro Division. I think the Devils are probably the only team in the Metro Division who could really challenge for the first spot in the Metro. But I still think Carolina has a very good shot at being possibly top in the Metro, but at the very least they're going to be a top 2 team in my opinion in the Metro unless something horribly goes wrong. So my offseason grade for them is a B+. I don't really think they could have done much better. Maybe they could have brought back a little bit of a better, more stable goaltender than Ranta, who has an injury history. Besides that, I don't really think that they could have done much on the goaltending side. Defensively, I think they did fantastic. I wouldn't have changed anything they would have done. Forward group, they could have probably added another more dynamic forward than just Michael Bunting. I think that could have been a possible improvement for the Carolina Hurricanes. But all in all, I think they did quite well this offseason. And I think if I were to redo it again, maybe a little bit of a better forward group, maybe add another top 6 forward, maybe add a bit of a better backup than Ranta, but still, in my eyes, the Carolina Hurricanes did fantastic, and I think definitely warrant a B+ rating. So, going to be interesting to see, but I think the Canes warrant a B+ rating, and I expect the Carolina Hurricanes to once again be a top 2 team in the Metropolitan Division. Going over to the Columbus Blue Jackets, they did not have a fantastic season last year. Last offseason, they signed Johnny Gaudreau. A lot of people thought this would be a year where the Jackets would be able to grow, maybe compete for a playoff spot, maybe not make it, but compete. I had them making the playoffs, but they wound up having a ton of injuries. It really kept that team down this past year. They wound up finishing with a record of 25, 48, and 9 for 59 points. That's 8th in the Metro, 16th in the Eastern Conference. So last in the Eastern Conference, only second to last in the entire NHL, and they finished 33 points back of the Panthers for the final wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. So they did not have a fantastic season last year. Definitely, I think there was a lot of people who thought they could have done better, but injuries really bit them in the butt last year. I think they had probably the most injuries out of all of those teams. They were playing with half of an AHL roster basically the entire season. They lost guys like Werenski, Boqvist, numerous NHL forwards. They even lost guys like Elvis Merzlikins for a certain amount of time too. So definitely, the injuries bug really bit the Jackets hard last year. So they went out. They look to improve this team a little bit more. Hopefully, we stay a little more healthy this year so they can improve, compete for the playoffs. And I think they did quite well this offseason. If you look at their offseason loss and additions here, they're next to none. They did not really move anything this past year. On the significant losses, they lose Lane Peterson, who was a decent fourth line forward to Edmonton. They lose Gavin Bayreuther, who was a decent 6th-7th defenseman, to Dallas. And they lose Michael Hutchinson, who's a decent third-string goaltender, on a PTO to Detroit. Their additions, they add Ivan Provorov in a trade earlier in the offseason, which will improve their top four, as will the addition of Damon Severson, who they get from the New Jersey Devils. So in my eyes, they add Provorov and Severson, which drastically improves that top four on the defensive end. Forward group only loses Lane Peterson, so it's nowhere close to what is a really bad loss. Hutchinson on the third stringer, maybe that's a little bit of a bad loss, but I think the Jackets still have a decent tandem of Merzlikins and Tarasov right now in net. So, in my eyes, they did all right this offseason. Once again, I think the defense drastically improves. They did not add anything on the forward group or the goaltending, so not really anything overly significant that they lost, and they add a couple of decent top four defensemen. So, in my eyes, the Jackets did pretty well this offseason, and I really think that the addition of Provorov probably behind Werenski and Severson maybe as their second or first pair of defensemen on the right side, I think really improves that defense. Lose Bayreuther, not that bad when you have those two additions. Peterson is a replaceable fourth line forward. Hutchinson's a replaceable third string goaltender. All in all, I think the Jackets had a pretty good offseason. If you look at their top three picks in the 2023 draft, they had the third overall pick in the first round. They took Adam Fantilli, who's another young stud player. A lot of people had him going number 2. He falls in the Jackets' lap at number 3. And he looks like he'll most likely make the NHL roster this upcoming season. So, all in all, he's probably another addition. And if Fantilli replaces Lane Peterson in the lineup, the Jackets improved there too. So, at this point in time, Fantilli looks to be a solid top 6 forward long term, possibly the top line center of the Jackets long term. And I think this is a fantastic addition in the draft for the Jackets. They also get, in the second round, number 2 overall, center Gavin Brindley, who I think could be a fantastic addition long term. Once again, another center, so probably second, third line center long term. In the third round, number 2 overall, they take right winger William Whitewell, who I think should be a fantastic addition long term in that top 9. So all in all, the Jackets I think had a fantastic draft. They definitely had a lot of draft capital after what they did at the deadline, and I think they hit home pretty much on all of it, but it was definitely capped by Adam Fantilli, who's going to be a fantastic top 6 center for the Columbus Blue Jackets this upcoming season. If you look at my current projected lineup for the 2023-2024 season for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I have Johnny Gaudreau playing on the top line with Adam Fantilli and Patrick Laine. I have Kent Johnson playing on the second line with Boone Jenner and Kirill Marchenko. I have the third line being Alex Texier, Cole Sillinger, and Jack Roslovic. And then have Danforth, Crowley, and Robinson on the fourth line. I have Werenski and Severson on the top pair. I have Provorov and Juracek on the second pair. And I have Peak and Gabranson on the third pair on the defensive end. I have Merzlikins being the starter. I have Tarasov being the 1B. I have Olivier Bemstrom and Boqvist being the 3 spares. There's been some talk that Jake Bean may not be ready to start the season, so if that's true, then I'm going to have Bean start on injury reserve, and he should be able to make a return in the not-too-distant future, and that would leave them with a decently enough cap-compliant roster. So, all in all, I think the Jackets look really good. I think that forward group can contend with the best of them. The defense looks a lot better this year. The goaltending may be their sore spot of this team, but if Merzlikins can play well and Tarasov can show that he's still starter potential material, I think they should be just fine. So if you look at my current projected point total for the Columbus Blue Jackets in the 23-24 season, I currently have the Jackets finishing with a record of 39-33-10 for 88 points. 5th in the Metro Division, and 11th in the Eastern Conference, 29 more points than they had last year. So with no more injuries, hopefully this year, they'll probably have a few, but hopefully not as much as they did last year. With a better defense, still a really good offense, add Fantilli to the offense as well. They're going to be a lot better of a team this year. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. I think there's way too many teams in the Eastern Conference for them to jump to become a playoff team. But I think going into February, going into March, they're going to be competing for a playoff spot. I don't think they're going to make it to the playoffs, but I think they will compete for a playoff spot. I only see them missing the playoffs by a handful of points. So I have them having a much better season this year, and hopefully if they can stay healthy, they'll be a team who's going to be a competitive team, a scary team to face against, and a team who could possibly maybe not make the playoffs, but compete for the playoffs this upcoming season. So off-season grade, I think they'll probably get a B-. Not a great, stellar off-season, but they did really well. They add Provorov, they add Severson, adding Fantilli is really good, and they really didn't subtract anything off that roster. So I think they could have possibly gone like a top 6 center to maybe work with Fantilli in the top 6. Maybe moved a guy like Roslovic. Maybe moved 1 or 2 defensemen. to give maybe a guy like Nick Blankenberg a shot on the defensive pair. But in my opinion, I think the Jackets did pretty well this offseason. I think they definitely warrant a B- rating. So going to be interesting to see, but I think the Jackets warrant a B- rating, and you see them being a competitive team finishing just outside the playoff bar. So definitely going to be interesting to see. That's all I'm going to talk about here today. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Do the Jackets warrant a B- rating? Do the Canes warrant a B+ rating? Are the Canes going to be a top 2 team in the Metro again this year? Will they win a division, or are they going to finish second, maybe even third? Do the Jackets be a lot more competitive this year? Could they make the playoffs, or will they still be on the outside looking in? Definitely love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. But that's all we're going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe down below. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.